Our back course talking Final Fantasy IX Remake. We're here to talk about potential changes to the game that we wouldn't mind seeing. The video I want to make for a little bit now, and I have a few ideas for things that I wouldn't mind being changed when it comes to the 9 Remake. But I also put out a community post yesterday to kind of gauge your guys' thoughts on this as well, so we might look at some of those. I do want to say before we hop into it, for one, it's kind of hard to have this discussion without knowing what kind of a remake the 9 Remake is going to be. Is it just a visual thing? Is it like the 7 Remake sort of treatment? I don't know, right? And overall, when it comes to Final Fantasy IX, I think it's a great game. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasies. It's not my personal favorite, but if somebody were to say that it's like the best Final Fantasy game or it's their favorite Final Fantasy game, I wouldn't disagree, and I think it's very deserving of its high rating. I don't necessarily think that it needs like a ton of changes, but most of what I'm going to talk about, at least that I have written down, are just kind of like quality of life things and sort of minor shit. Nothing that really changes the game all that much. First and foremost, one that I mentioned in a relatively recent video is changing up how trans mode works. Like, conceptually, I love it. I think it looks really cool. The fact that our characters change form, essentially going like Super Saiyan or whatever. But also like that trans is a part of the story. It's in the narrative of the game, which isn't really in some of the other Final Fantasy games, at least the ones that I've played, like Limit Breaks in 7. You could maybe say that there's like a story reason for it or whatever, and Overdrive's in 10. But, you know, trans is actually part of the story, even with like Kuja towards like the end of the game, right? Trying to achieve trans mode. I just don't like that it activates by itself. That's like the main complaint that I think a lot of people have for it, and they could just simply change it to where once you have it, you can choose to activate it. It's probably explained somewhere, and I could probably look it up, but I just never understood that decision, even when I first played Final Fantasy IX back in like early 2000s with my friend, when he introduced the game to me. I just never liked it, just because coming off of like playing Final Fantasy VII and playing like Final Fantasy X and stuff, where you get your like powerful ultimate move and you can hold it and use it whenever you want to, right? And hopping into 9 and being forced to activate it against some random enemy that I'm fighting, just never liked it. It's a very simple quality of life change that I think would please pretty much everybody. I can't imagine there's anybody out there that's like arguing for the forced activation of trans mode. Another one that's like a common complaint when it comes to Final Fantasy IX is battle speed. It's a very simple one to fix, and I don't mean just like a button to increase speed, just in general. Increasing like battle speed and battle animation is just like a major complaint for Final Fantasy IX. It's something I definitely agree with. It's not as bad when you're playing like the modern port of the game, because you can speed up the game in general, make it like ×4 speed or whatever. So battles don't go that slow, but just in general, just speeding up animations and things. Another thing that I like to see changed, and I don't know how you change it exactly, but the active time events. It's something that I do like conceptually with FF9. I just don't like that they're missable, right? If you do a particular one before another one, you can't view that one anymore or whatever. And obviously, if you don't view them right then and there when they're available, you usually can't watch them again, depending. Stuff like that. And kind of an example I can give of why I don't like them is, like, last time I played FF9, which it's been a couple years at this point, is on Xbox. I was following a guide. Something I love to do with older RPGs is looking up, like, 100% walkthrough guides, try to like learn things I never knew about the game. And even with following a guide, there's a 100% completion guide. I still failed to view them all because there's actually like a trophy/achievement for viewing all of them or like a certain amount of them. And I somehow didn't get it, even following a guide. And that could have been a fuck up on my end. It could have been a fuck up on their walkthrough, but I still have never seen them all. I don't know exactly how you change it, but maybe you can put them in a menu somewhere to where you can like view them anytime you want to, or just make them not missable. Like, as in, like, when you come to an area and the window pops up and you can do like 2 or 3 of the active time events, like they're always there available in that area or something, or at least in that segment of the story where they're just not missable. Maybe, I don't know. Like I mentioned previously, I think it's conceptually great. They're nice little story pieces and little pieces of exposition. You can learn a lot about the characters and things like that through all those active time events. It just sucks that they're so easily missable. And lastly, for me, at least that I have written down, is no random encounters. It's something that when I go back to these older RPGs that I'm just not a fan of. And this could go back to the enhanced like battle speed thing that we talked about previously. Depending on what kind of remake it is, if it is just a visual remake and they're just keeping it pretty much like it was with the original game, you could have those modern enhancements that we have with the modern ports, where you could click a button and get enhanced speed, you click both buttons and you get like, no random encounters. They could just add that in, and that would be a fine workaround, right? If I don't want to like fucking run into enemies right now, I can just click these buttons and let's get rid of random encounters. But if they're not going to do that, I would like there to be like enemies on screen that I can see. One of my favorite, I guess, ports of a game is the Dragon Quest VIII on 3DS. Like, that version of that game has so many fucking quality of life changes that I absolutely adore. It's probably my favorite version of a game. But one of the changes they made to that is getting rid of random encounters and having enemies on screen in front of you that you can avoid. Now, obviously, that is a more kind of open world style game, but it's having enemies on screen. It's like, okay, there's an enemy right there. I'm just going to walk around them and continue on. Like, that is such a fucking great change Because it kind of come down to what kind of a remake the 9 Remake is, but that's something that I wouldn't mind them changing. But again, they could just simply add in the no encounters button or whatever, and that'd be perfectly fine. Actually, there's one more that I didn't have written down, but it's a very common complaint when it comes to Final Fantasy IX, and it's the final boss, Necron. This will kind of come down to also what kind of a remake it is, because we're talking about, at this point, adding additional stuff to the game. But if they're going to do that kind of a remake where they're giving us new shit, then put in some foreshadowing for Necron. I don't know how you do it, because he's like some fucking other dimensional guy that controls life and death or whatever the fuck. So I don't know how you do it exactly, but he just kind of comes out of nowhere, right? Like Kuja like fucking destroys everything or whatever, and Necron's like, yo, I'm here to fuck shit up too. So like, I don't know, you got to add something in there to like allude to the fact that this being exists. Visually, he's a really cool looking enemy, and I like what he represents, like what his character is about or whatever, if you want to call it that. But he just literally comes out of nowhere. Whereas, like, pretty much every other Final Fantasy that I can think of, like, you know about him. Like, the final boss of 10 is Yu Yevon, right? And you learn about Yu Yevon later in the game, but you learn about him. And then you end up fighting him at the end of the game. And obviously, like, 7, you have Sephiroth, and so on and so forth. You learn about Ultimecia and 8 throughout the game, stuff like that, right? So it's just one of those things, it's like, what was that? That seems like this, like, last-minute decision. I don't know if there's, like, dev things that have been talked about over the years. Like, maybe there's meant to be more. I know they were wanting to use his arena for Hades. I think there's, like, concept art of Hades in that, like, kind of Coliseum thing you fight him in, something like that. So it almost feels like Necron literally came out of nowhere. And actually looking into it a bit more, it does seem like Hades was meant to be the final boss of the game, because there's like eyeballs on his sword and his throne that he's sitting on. And then like the final battle arena, there's like blinking eyes on the wall and shit. So looking through the replies on my community post, a pretty common suggestion that people have is voice acting. This will kind of come down to sort of what kind of a remake it is. It's not impossible for them to just do like a visual overhaul, but also add in voice acting, because they sort of did that with the Crisis Core remaster, right? Crisis Core Reunion, because they completely re-recorded all the lines, but also recorded dialogue for lines that weren't voiced previously with the original version of Crisis Core. Even if this game is just a visual remake, they could still add in voice acting. Will they do it? I don't know. If it is like the FF7 Remake treatment, then I would be surprised if there wasn't voice acting. That'd be kind of weird. Another pretty common one in the replies is Beatrix being a party member, which I think would make a lot of sense, because she does have like her own move pool and inevitably becomes a good guy and like fights alongside us and stuff like that throughout the game. So it kind of makes sense. It's something we've seen before in other games. Like if I go back to like the 3DS port of Dragon Quest VIII, like they added additional party members to that game. There's only 4 in the original, and they added 2 in the 3DS version. They're characters that you meet along your journey. They never fight alongside you, but they become party members in that version. Have their own moves and their own weapon categories that didn't even exist in the original version of Dragon Quest VIII. I bring that up just because it's not actually unheard of when it comes to Square Enix's own games, right? When they like port games, remaster games, whatever you want to call. I don't exactly know what the 3DS version of Dragon Quest VIII is considered, but they've done it before. I will say Final Fantasy VIII does have kind of an already stacked roster, because there are 8 party members by the end of the game. But I mean, Final Fantasy VII, for example, has 9 party members by the end of it, so it's not impossible. Pretty common one too I see when people talk about like changes they'd like with the 9 Remake is changing Tetramaster. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people prefer Final Fantasy VIII's card game over 9, and I've never understood that. I think they're both good, but I just do not like the rules thing that's in Final Fantasy VIII. I fucking hate it. I hate going to a region and there's like these abstract rules and weird shit. I just want to play some cards, bro. I just want to duel Shadow Realm some people. And Final Fantasy IX is a lot more simple, but also more complex with like the additional directions, because with A, you can only use cards and they only go up, down, left, or right, whereas you have the corners of the cards when it comes to 9, and then you have like stats on the card. There's like a number, a letter, and the 2 numbers, and they all correlate to something like your attack stat and defense stat and some other shit. It's a little intricate, and then you have like the blocks that are on the map, whatever you're fighting or whatever, that like block different directions and stuff. I don't know. I've always preferred 9s. I think it's simpler but more complicated in its own way. As I've said countless times on this channel, I like that you can upgrade your cards. Like, I don't know exactly what does it. I don't remember exactly, just playing games, I guess, defeating other cards. I don't know exactly what does it. But your cards get stronger as you go, and that's just super interesting to me. But it's always going to be subjective. Most people seem to agree that 8's better than 9 in terms of the card game. But I just happen to disagree. Guess would be that a lot of people that don't like the card game in 9 don't fully understand it, as in, like, they don't know what, like, the number means on the card in terms of it being like an attack and defense and all that other shit. And as of right now, I don't even fully remember what it is either. But once you understand what each of those symbols means, and then you have your directions on your card, it's pretty simple. People also complain that you got to play Tetramaster within the story, which is, I guess, kind of a fair complaint, but it's not like you have to win to continue the story, right? You can lose that tournament. It doesn't really matter. It's like the Blitzball tournament in Final Fantasy X. Like, you're forced to do that in the story, but you don't have to win, like, because it's fucking hard to win even with a Eject Shot. but you're not forced to win to continue the story, so it's not the biggest deal. Actually, to throw a little bit of shade at FF7, love the game. I've never liked the chocobo racing in the original FF7. Never been a fan of it at all, and you have to win the race when you're in the prison in order to progress the story. And as a kid, I fucking struggled with it. Even with like the stamina trick later on in life, for some reason, I still struggle with it. I don't know what it is. My last playthrough of FF7, when I finally got the platinum on the game, I think I lost like the first chocobo race, and then I had to like do it again. I was like, Jesus, I suck. I've always sucked at this. The racing in Rebirth is fucking fantastic, though. What a great minigame. I mean, it was easy. I fucking flawlessly beat every race without ever losing one single time, but it's still fun. Another kind of common one, at least a few people mentioned it, is the jump rope minigame and like the trophy attached to that. It's actually the reason I haven't played through 9 in a little while, because I've been kind of exclusively gaming on PlayStation for the last couple years here, and I've been trying to platinum the games that I do play here recently, and that's what's required for the platinum. You have to get 1,000 jump ropes in a fucking row, and you can suck my dick backwards. I'm never doing it. Just change it to where it's like a lower number that's more feasible, or make it to where it's like you gotta get 1,000 jump ropes total. Like, so even if you could only do like 10 at a time, you could eventually reach it. That'd be okay. But having to do it in a row, in one go, never, ever, ever in my life will I even remotely try to think about attempting that. I guess the last one here for the video that I've seen somewhat common, there's at least like one comment or so under my community post, but also I've seen like Game Rant talk about it in like an article they put out very recently, is like more story stuff for particular characters like Amaranth and Quina and other characters like later in the game where they don't get as much as like Zidane does, or like Garnet or Vivi or whatever. And then it'll just kind of come down to what kind of a remake it is, right? If it's just a visual overhaul, we can't really expect things like that. That'd be them adding completely brand new shit that didn't exist in the original, Final Fantasy IX. Because if the game's getting something like the 7 Remake treatment, where it's essentially a brand new game entirely, then I imagine every character would have additional shit. I can certainly agree that some characters like Amaranth definitely need more to their character, more to their story for sure. That'll be pretty much it for the video. Of course, pass off to you guys. Assuming that the 9 Remake is real, what changes would you like to see? This obviously does matter for the kind of remake it is, but it's kind of in general, what are some things you maybe didn't like about the original 9 that you wouldn't mind seeing in the remake changed? Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so snorks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.